beating Bangladesh and winning white ball matches in England. This is the Murley End. I'm Mark Machado, and I'm joined by my cousin Dominic Machado in the USA and Nick Brookes, the doyen of Sri Lankan cricket in the Caribbean. For the duration of this show, we're going to guide you through the last week in Sri Lankan cricket and look forward to an exciting 7 days. Lads, I normally would kind of start a show like this by asking you what's kind of been your highlight, but I'm just going to hijack it and just say I've been to sports events all over the world. I've seen Sri Lanka win white ball games. I've seen them win test matches, but nothing will ever beat the excitement of seeing seeing the Sri Lanka women's side beat England for the first time ever, and that being in England as well, as I got to witness on Saturday. I'm still absolutely buzzing from it. Even now, I kind of can't believe it happened. I was there on Thursday when Sri Lanka lost a washed out game by 12 runs in Hove, and the whole thing ended very disappointingly from a Sri Lankan perspective. And then to see them come back and respond like that, oh my gosh, my heart just filled with pure joy. And I think I'm ready to retire from watching all forms of cricket right now. However, I won't, because there is not only a decider in the T20 series with England coming up in Derby on Wednesday, but there's also the men in the Asia Cup, and we're kind of on the horizon. We can see the World Cup, can't we? Dom, Nick, you guys followed all the cricket the last few days. Dom, what's your kind of big headline news from Sri Lanka's last 7 days in cricket?
I think I agree with you, Mark. I think the women's win was truly spectacular. And the star turn by Charmi Atapattu, I think she was absolutely phenomenal. She started them off with a wicket in the first over and the wicket of Danny Wyatt. And then she comes out, right? There's a score of 104 to chase, which is, Sri Lanka could crumble to that. And she absolutely blasts the England bowling all over the park. That was power hitting I haven't seen in a Sri Lankan batter since 5 or 6 years now. And it was absolutely amazing. Her leadership was amazing. And right now I want to call out the BBL, the WPL, for not taking a chance on her. I saw the stats the other day. Kamari has a 130 strike rate, which for the women's game is exceptional. In T20Is this year, she has hit the most sixes and scored the third most runs. She's an all-rounder. The fact that she's not being drafted into these leagues is absolutely ridiculous. So shout out to Chamri and to all the girls and to all the women on that team who were absolutely exceptional. It wasn't all about her, but I wanted to highlight her, especially given what happened with the BBL draft just now.
Nick, why isn't Charmi getting picked up by these leagues?
I've got no idea, Marky. I think that it's it has to be just a sort of discriminatory thing, right? The thinking is that Sri Lankan women can't play. I mean, I wanted to highlight the fact that I saw England come to the Pisara in 2019, and the gulf between the two sides was drastic. So to see Sri Lanka come to England 4 years later and win a game is just remarkable, and it shows how far these women have come in a short space of time. But I think after this series, I mean, we keep saying this over and over again, that it's getting harder and harder to overlook Jamari. And I'm pretty confident we'll see her playing in the 100 next year, hopefully in the WPL as well. And I think we should highlight the fact that it really, when we've seen Sri Lanka win games in the past, we've often talked about it being a one-woman effort. This wasn't that at all. The bowling was superb from start to finish. The fielding was professional. And I mean, it's just so great. I always think that those kind of chases, 105, 110, 120, if you come out conservatively and try and go at 5 and over, you can get yourself into trouble. And so it was really, really pleasing to see Sri Lanka come out and blast it and leave no doubt. And I mean, all the pressure is on England now, right? They've come into this series with a young squad thinking that they were just going to walk through this, and now they're facing a decider tomorrow, in probably quite spin-friendly conditions. Again, it's a potential banana skin.
Yeah, when you watch Charmery up close, which I've got to do a couple of times now. It's unbelievable how athletic she is. She's what I would regard as a total athlete. I'd say, you know, Sri Lanka and Sri Lankan cricket in particular has pioneered maybe not the least athletic people getting to the end of their athletic ability in terms of the range. You know, you look at people like Rangana Herath and even Murali himself, who probably, you know, they're not the most classical athletes in the world, but they still, you know, they've harnessed the skill and they've been incredibly good at it. But Charmry's not like that. She doesn't fit into that. She's a pure athlete. You see her when she's fielding, you see her sprinting past other fielders when she's, you know, she's that desperate to stop fours and and even singles, right? I think it's easy to suggest that Sri Lanka are one women's side. They're definitely not. You look at the bowling, it's definitely not a one woman effort. But Charmry is by far and away the best striker off the ball. And I think sometimes that leads to her maybe kind of not doing herself justice, because I don't think she has the luxury of being able to, of knowing that there might be someone else at the coming in to who can pick up the strike rate. And I think a few times we definitely saw this in Hove. Has to be the one that really smacks that ball out literally out the park sometimes, and because of that she has to take risks that I don't necessarily think she would necessarily take if she was in a team with other like minded players. And I don't really understand why she hasn't been picked by other franchises. It kind of feels to me, I saw Lasses Malinga talking about it on social media earlier, it kind of feels a bit like Murali getting called out in the way it's bringing the whole of the Sri Lankan cricket fraternity together. I dare I say the whole of Sri Lanka together in this kind of effort to try and get her into back into one of these franchises. I know she's played for the Renegades, but I think her mate, I was desperate. We talked about this last time around, that when she came over, that she put in at least one massive performance that kind of, you know, made the 100 team sit up and go, we need to get this girl in our side. She's done that now. I mean, if they can win the series in Derby, that's historic. And actually, you know, it's been an incredible calendar year for the Sri Lanka women's side. They got some big wins. They beat South Africa, they're eventual finalists at the World Cup, which in my mind, if you go by the Scottish method, it means they finished third at the World Cup. They beat New Zealand in a T20 series for the first time, which also included getting the first win against New Zealand, I think. When you speak to the coaches, and I was lucky enough to do that at the games, they're really excited about the kind of younger group of players who are coming through. People like Vishmi, people like Kavisha, the kind of new bowler that they've got, the new spinner that they've got coming through the ranks. These are the players who are very young and very, you know, they haven't played a huge amount, but they're going to be playing in this team for the next kind of 10 to 15 years in some of those cases, right? And they've come to England. They haven't, you know, they've gone toe to toe with them, and they've got to win. It's absolutely massive, and I think the future's bright for Sri Lankan women's cricket. They've got a T10 tournament starting later on this year. I think what I'd really like to see would be the creation of women's big matches. If the girls' schools start to really embrace cricket the way the boys' schools have, and I know there's a lot of people who think that, you know, the schools cricket in Sri Lanka is a double-edged sword when it comes to the boys, and I agree with a lot of that argument, but I just want to see a more clear, defined path for girls to get into the game and stay in the game and be nurtured through the game. And I've spoken about this before. I think if girls' schools start to really embrace cricket, then I think Sri Lanka could be a force in cricket, in women's cricket, the way it is in men's cricket. I really get the feeling that Sri Lanka women are they're in the same place the men were in kind of circa 92 to in the, you know, up to winning the World Cup in 96. I think if there's a bit more investment, if people start to back the girls and start to notice them a little bit more, and they get a bit more exposure outside, I think they can go to a major ICC tournament at some point and really do some damage, which, you know, we'd all love to see, but we're paid up members of the Sri Lankan Cricket Fan Club, right?
See, I was going to say...
Quite right, Marky. I agree with everything you said. I think Kavisha and Vishmi are both future stars. And yeah, the women's game just seems to be really moving in the right direction, and long may it last. Yeah, it's just remarkable, given also that the England women have all been playing the 100. They've all had a really good run in, and Sri Lanka have come into unfamiliar conditions in a series that no one gave them a hope in hell in, and have competed so strongly. I think the whole island should feel very proud.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe we even compare this to that win in the 95 Benson and Hodges series that Sri Lanka has against Australia that provides that belief. You're in that team and all of a sudden you think, you know what? Previously, we felt like there were some games where we shouldn't even be here. But now we know we belong. We have the belief. And for those young players, that's an incredible gift to give them to say, okay, we can go to England and beat England in England, right? They can beat anyone in the world when they're on their day. And that sense of belief is going to go a long way. And again, for a lot of the younger members of the team, Kavisha, and again, even, we talk about one-man band, and Chamri was great, but they were still runs to get. Summer Wikrama and Vishmi both got some serious runs, and Vishmi ended the innings with a 6. What a way! What kind of confidence is that, right? You need one run to get, and you're swinging for the fences. I think this is a huge confidence boost, and I think whatever happens in the decider, they will carry this forward along with that ODI win against New Zealand as something to show that they can compete with anyone in world cricket.
I think we need to, and I'm hesitant here to say it, but I'm going to say it. We need to give SLC some credit, right? Because they've backed these girls. There's a long period where they weren't backing them to the way they should do, but now they've got a real coaching setup over here. They've got Melinda Wanapura, they've got Ramesh Ratnayaka, they've got Dharindu Pereira, real serious coaches coming in who really know cricket inside and out, can really improve players, right? And really know how to communicate with young players, real youth development. I mean, you go and watch before the game, and you see the two teams doing their warm ups and practicing and all that. In terms of resources that they have at that very moment, I mean, there's not much between them, right? And there's a routine. This isn't like just 11 random girls have kind of turned up. The SLC have really got their act together with what they're providing the girls at the moment. I mean, I know there's no pay equality and that there's a lot of other things that they can be doing. They can do a lot more, but for that moment while they're there, they are, they are made to feel at least as much as Sri Lanka can that they're going toe to toe with them. I was, when I was walking out the stadium in Hove on Thursday, I was basically, the girls were coming out as well because I had to stick about for press conferences and stuff like that, and I could just feel from the girls and talking to some of the staff that they were really gutted to lose that game. They didn't think they'd put in a good performance. They didn't think they'd done what they could do, and they really felt that they had a lot more to give. And just to see them come out and do it on the Saturday just showed, I thought, real character, real right mentality, and just bodes so well. I should say, Essex did so much to make Sri Lankans feel welcome in travel. So not that wasn't done at Hove. At Hove, it was kind of a kind of semi-washed out day. So maybe they weren't able to do as much as they potentially had planned. But I think if you've got young daughters and they're watching that, I can't imagine what it must feel like as well. The other thing is I am a 37-year-old man, and all these young Sri Lankan girls, like these 18-year-olds, have got me like nervous and anxious about winning a game and screaming like a 13-year-old at a Harry Styles concert. It's crazy. I love it, and I'm in total awe of them. I'm in absolute awe of what they've been able to achieve, and I hope we talk about Charmery not getting the big contracts. I'd love to see, and I think there's about 4 or 5 other players who easily could go around the world and play franchise cricket. And I think at this point, what we really need for Sri Lanka women to step up is we need the rest of the cricketing community to go, do you know what? We need to help this team get to the next level, and that is if we got 4 girls playing the 100 next year, the experience they get from that, playing in another culture, playing with different coaches would be invaluable for the way the cricket's going. Anyway, this is almost turned into a sermon, but yeah, hopefully we win on Wednesday and we win the series. If not, we'll come back in the 1 days, and no doubt we'll win that. That'd be easy. That'd be easy. Dom.
Yeah, I was going to say add one thing that I was really heartened by was just how aggressive they were when they came out and bowled. You know, how many of their deliveries were bold deliveries, right? They were not playing cautious. They were not trying to keep runs down. They were attacking from ball one. And you got to love that mentality, especially when they got smacked around a little bit the first match. So what a great mentality to bring in. They were not playing scared. They were not playing fearful cricket. And that is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. I just love it, like on the front foot from the get-go, right? It's absolutely brilliant. Anyway, Nick, let's talk about Asia Cup. Let's talk about Sri Lanka's performance against Bangladesh. What were the highs? What were the lows? Overall, how do you kind of rate the performance?
I think it was a pretty good performance, Marky. I mean, obviously the bowling was stronger than the batting. The way Sri Lanka bowled was a huge highlight for me. I thought Shanaka cycled the bowlers really well early, particularly through those first 15, 20 overs. And we got into a position, I think, around 25 overs where there was still a bank of 7 from Vikshana, 7 from Patarana. And I mean, even, God, it feels like it was a million years ago now. There was that partnership, I think it was between Tawhid and Shanto. But Sri Lanka were just bowling so many dot balls. As a unit, I thought they were really straight stump to stump. And they gave Bangladesh nothing. Vikshana, I thought, was superb. He's so hard to score off. His variations seem almost imperceptible. To me, it looked like, when I can't even remember what day it was, but the stop ball that he was bowling was kind of that finger flick carom. And then he was mixing in the straight to one, the off break. And Bangladesh seemed to look like they didn't know how to play him at all. Obviously, Patarana claims the headlines with wickets. He showed a bit of everything, didn't he? He got real bounce. He was bowling up at 145 regularly and then mixing in those slower balls. Superb bowling performance. The batting is obviously more of a worry. And I mean, when Sri Lanka lost those 2 quick wickets up front and then Kusal Mendes is scratching around, you're thinking, is this going to turn into a real dogfight? But I've got to pay testament to Sadira, someone who we had maybe talked about as, being there keeping Kusal Pereira's place warm. And he looked by far the most fluid of the batsmen, right? Came out and smoked a couple of cover drives early, which I think set everyone at ease. And in the end, it was fairly routine. And Sri Lanka, I mean, hopefully are looking still well placed for the final 4. I don't think Bangladesh winning that game yesterday against Afghanistan was ideal for Sri Lanka, but it wasn't a great performance from Afghanistan, and I think Sri Lanka have to feel confident going to the Gaddafi, the home of Sri Lanka's greatest cricketing triumph, that they're going to pull off a good victory tomorrow and see us into the last 4.
Dom, I think we all agree with Nick's assessment of the bowling there, of Sri Lanka's bowling I thought was exceptional that day. Teachner, Patarana, the two kind of stands out. Teachner, I think over the next kind of couple of months, his plan should be to kind of be, firmly considered by people who might not have heard of him, already, which is at this point, I think is just people watching cricket from England and Australia, as one of the top spinners in the world. And Patarana, it was great to see how quickly he seems to be growing into one day cricket, considering how little he's played. Can we talk about the baton, though, Dom? Because the openers didn't score runs. Kusal Mendes was all over the place, if you're going to be brutal about it. Do we need to rethink it a little bit, or am I being reactionary like a number of other Sri Lanka fans on social media, maybe?
Yeah, I'm not as concerned about the batting. So yes, in some ways, this game was a bit of a microcosm of Sri Lanka over the last 6 months. exceptional bowling, exceptional variations, and then a bit of some dodgy batting effort, but making it over the line. But I look at India's match against Pakistan on the same pitch a few days later, and they struggled. Shubman Gill was 10 off of 31. Their openers were gone early. Virat Kohli was gone early. And those are high-quality batsmen who struggled against Pakistan's pace attack. And Bangladesh's pace attack or attack in general might not look as strong as Pakistan's, but actually, statistically, in the last year, they have had the best power play bowling average of any side. So they've been very, very good in the power play. So one, we should give credit to Bangladesh. I thought they bowled exceptionally well during that stage to keep Sri Lanka quiet. And as we saw during the LPL, the pitch at Pallekele is a little too paced. It's hard to get going. I want to say something a little bit about Kusal Mendis's innings. Yes, 5 off of 21. No one wants to see that. But I think at the same time, he was playing a role. He knew, okay, I cannot lose my wicket right now. I cannot go for a flashy drive. The reason for the low scoring rate was generally playing defensive shots. He wanted to see off the new ball. He wanted to see off Toscan. He wanted to see off Shoreful. He wanted to see off the Fizz. And he was thinking, okay, if I bat 20, 25 balls, I can get going and make a score and carry us over the line. And it also allowed Sadira, right, to get going. He could play those 2 cover drives he played early in his innings. He could play the pull. They put on a 30-run partnership, which in the context of that match was I think the 3rd highest partnership that was put up through the Sri Lankan innings. And even Sadira, as good as he looked, ended up with about a 70 strike rate. And Charith, who finished the innings superbly well, ended up with something like a 65 strike rate. So I think, yes, would we have liked to see the Sri Lankan openers do better? Yeah. Would we have liked to see Kusal Mendis look more fluent? Yes. But I think especially when you're 15 for 2, you know you have to win the game to put yourself in good position to move on. I'm not that worried, especially given that the Indian batsman did, by and large, the same thing a couple days later.
Nick, does Kusal Pereira get into this side?
It's really tricky, isn't it? Because I think we saw Sadira as the vulnerable one, and he looked the best out of any of the top 5. I also thought it was really promising to see Charith kind of tough through it a bit. Obviously, you don't have the time to do that in T20. So to see him kind of start scratchily and then find a bit of a groove was encouraging. For me, at the moment, because Saljanith doesn't come straight back in, and I wonder whether you're starting to look at that opener berth again as the place where he might come in and battle somewhere in the top 3 rather than coming in as the number 4, which is where we'd sort of seen his spot being before the series started. How do you guys see it?
I agree. You know, we should add, and we haven't mentioned it, 11 victories in a row.
Yeah. Which is that some kind of record or equaling some kind of record?
Yeah, Sri Lanka's record. I think the all-time record is Australia with 21, but it's Sri Lanka's all-time record for most wins in a row. And of course, the haters, the trolls will point out, who was that against, right? The best team is either Afghanistan or Bangladesh. But to win 11 matches in a row, effectively with more or less with this squad, I think it means you have to maintain some level of continuity. There's good brotherhood in the squad. And at this point, I'm not sure if Kusal will come in. We also know he's an injury risk. And one thing I'll raise as well is if there was, in addition to the batting, there were some points where the fielding wasn't quite up to snuff. So I would be worried if Kusal came in that the fielding might take a hit further.
When
Am I right in thinking too, Dom? Oh, sorry, Marky. Am I right in thinking that it's 11 sides bowled out in a row as well?
Yes.
I mean, which really says something. And I mean, especially in this game where Bangladesh had a proper seam attack and they were getting swing and seam up front, which, I mean, Sri Lanka opened with a spinner. So if things get back to full strength, I mean, this bowling attack is looking dynamic. It's fireworks to come.
When I was in Essex watching the girls dive around the field like their life depended on it, in many ways, you could argue that potentially their livelihoods did. I was suddenly hit with the thought: why isn't Ashton Bandera in this squad? Because he's our professional fielder, right? And there's always a Sri Lankan player injured. I suppose if you're not picking Barnica, then there's a good chance that the 11 that you start to select the game might all actually field at the same time, right? So maybe they didn't think they'd be able to get him on as effectively as possible. I just think maybe not picking him might have been a bit of a mistake, because if he could field 20 or 30 overs in a game, firstly, you can rest some bowlers, and secondly, he's probably stopping 5 or 6 runs for every kind of 10 overs he's in the field, I'd imagine. But as my good friend Jared Kimber has recently pointed out in a very successful video he released about Harry Brookes' selection, the ICC only allow, I think it's 15 or 16 players in the squad for an ICC tournament. So maybe they just didn't feel they could sacrifice one of those for poor old Ashton. Go back to the KJP thing. For me, I don't think you can really change the kind of top 3. I think after the performance that we just put in, I don't think you can drop Sadira. I don't know what kind of message that sends out to the side. And Asalanka, I still feel is at this stage still a surefire pick. And I mean, again, he top scored for us and carried the bat through to the end. So you can't drop him. I don't know if he comes in. I don't know where he comes in, but we're SLC, absolutely anything's possible, right? I think our domestic tournaments currently suspended, all domestic cricket's currently suspended because they're falling out with the sports ministry or something like that. So who knows where this all lands? Let's look ahead to the Afghanistan game. This is a banana skin, right? Because Afghanistan did not put a performance in against Bangladesh. Bangladesh, even though we've beaten them, are somehow qualified because of run rates and various other iterations of this of having 6 teams into 2 pools. How does Sri Lanka just make sure they get the result in Lahore that they need?
It's definitely a banana skin for me, Marky, and it's a game where I think the toss is important. I think Sri Lanka want to win the toss and bowl first, even though obviously Lahore looks like a better batting pitch than Kandy. I think if you risk batting first and getting shot out, I don't know, Rashid Khan gets on a real run, things could get nasty. So hopefully win the toss, put up, keep Afghanistan to sort of modest score and then win the game. Afghanistan went about their chase really strangely. I think it was Ramat Shah, who was like sort of had a 30 off 60. It looked like he was doing a bit of a Gavaskar in 75 impression. And Afghanistan, they obviously have 10 overs of Rashid to bank on, but they're without Naveen ul Haq. They didn't play Noor Ahmed. I don't think that attack is overall as strong as it could be. So I hope Sri Lanka should get through this, and I think if they're playing anything like their best cricket, they will.
I would actually, I was going to disagree, Nick, and say that we should bat first, because my concern is what happens if Afghanistan puts runs on the board, because they've put up some big runs against us at home lately. I think they've had a couple 300-run performances, and because Gaddafi seems to be a very heavy run scoring pitch, my thought was, okay, get in, score 300. If you score 300, it basically makes it impossible such that you don't qualify. They'd have to score 300 in like 37 overs or something like that. And I trust our bowling attack to do the job. But that other side of the coin is also there. Rashid Khan goes crazy and we get shot out for 150. There goes our Asia Cup chances.
I think the balance of probability, I think I'm with Nick here, and I think you want to bat second, right? Because that way you kind of know what you need to get through. When at lunch or at tea or at the innings break, basically. But I think it's a tough one. I think it feels obviously Lahore's been a place, and that stadium in particular has been a place that's been very good for Sri Lanka over the years. But it feels like this could, this is such an unknown. And even though I absolutely adore this team, there's loads of players in here I think could go on to be great. I do think sometimes we can lack a bit of inexperience in those big moments. That said, this team kind of by and large has been together for about 3 years now, right? So,
yeah, it's developing as a unit, and I think also Afghanistan, players like Ramanullah Gurbaz and Najibullah Zadran, who are probably their biggest threats in terms of scoring big runs fast, have both been a little bit out of form in recent months. Someone like Mohamed Nabi looks like his best days are behind him. And they just always seem to be a team. I know they're still very young.
The thing about Gurbaz, right, is he's played so much LPL and so much cricket with teaching and
he knows these guys.
He knows these guys, right? If he's thinking I need a big score, what team can I do that against? He's probably thinking that Sri Lanka bowling attack, which I know very well, on a pitch that might be slightly foreign to them. That's where he could potentially. Oh man, like Gurbaz domestically is pretty much Sri Lankan, right? He plays that often in Sri Lanka, right? So I do that. That's why I think I'm a little bit. I think didn't he get a century a few weeks ago against Pakistan? Have I made that up?
No, he did. He did. He scored he scored a century, but he's been generally that was the first score of note he's made in a while. But I am afraid of Gurbaz. I've seen him just go off, and when he goes off, it's really,
when he goes, right?
Yeah. I think the other thing that I'll point out here is if it is a bit of a dead pitch, I do favor our attack over theirs. Someone like Patirana can bowl anywhere, right? It doesn't matter. And that's one of, you can both critique and sort of make an argument for him because what he's going to do, right? He's going to bowl short. He's going to bowl full. He has the slower ball, and that takes the pitch out of the equation pretty much. And I think on this pitch, he'll be able to provide that extra little bit. And same with Tikshana. I think the subtle variety on a pitch like Gaddafi should be very, very helpful.
If we have to bowl 50 overs, right, then we know the Patirana overs and the Tikshana overs are going to be the overs that the batters fear the most, and they're probably not going to try and score big runs off. It's the other 30, right? So it's DDS again. He's a wily old goat, isn't he? He's going to within a couple of overs, he's going to figure out what he can and can't do on that pitch, and he's going to kind of tighten it up a little bit. It's if they go with the same team that they went with in the first game, and I'm not sure Banura doesn't play. I don't know if that they might go with an extra seamer in Pakistan. Who knows? Then Rajatha and Walalage are the two players that might be the ones they try and hit. I don't kind of know what would happen if you tried to hit Walalage. Like, he's very young. I adore the player, but how does he react? What's he got in his game? When I've talked to the people around him, and they all suggest that if you strike, he'll try and strike. He's got that kind of wiliness that you might need in that situation. Rajatha, we've seen him in the past go for big runs. I know what about him though. He's one of those soldiers who just keep running over the top, as it were, and he'll do what he can and try and do his best. So it's those 30 overs that I worry about, because I think sometimes we can be a little bit impatient when we're watching 50 over cricket. We've kind of got used to try and get them all out for under 140, and that's a good score, right? But actually, in 50 over cricket, anything around anything around 220 should be reasonably easy to chase down, right? And I think sometimes we can lose patience in the pacing of the game a little bit because we've just got so used to watching short formats.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thought that was something that Shanaka did really well when we played Bangladesh. Once we had those 2 wickets, he kind of snuck in a few overs from Dhananjaya. It felt like Dhananjaya had bowled 4 or 5 inside the first 20 overs. And then I just think the backloading Thikshana and Patirana like that is so daunting, especially if you've gone off slowly and you're feeling like you've got to up the rate in the last 20 overs. And you know that you're facing a back from those guys. It makes things really difficult, right? And I thought Walalage bowled superbly again. Stump to stump, mixing in those ones that turn and the ones that slide. I mean, I'm just full of optimism about this Sri Lanka attack. I wouldn't mind seeing Binura unfurled. But yeah, I think we're looking really good, building well.
Yeah, I think back to the 2022 series with Australia, where Glenn Maxwell came at Walalage and Walalage got him out a couple times. So so if you can weather that storm, you can weather any storm. So I think on international debut, if he was able to handle that, I back him to handle a bit of a aggressive Afghani lineup here. Rajatha, that's my worry, and my worry is Gurbaz. He bowls a few hit me balls up front and lets Gurbaz get ticking. That could spell trouble. So I think those early overs are going to be decisive. Hopefully Rajasthan can get some swing and get him to nick off. But I think that's going to be very, very key. How can they get Gurbaz out? And I also kind of don't mind, Nick, you were talking about the strangeness of the chase. Afghanistan has a little bit of has some plotters in the sort of top order and middle order. Letting those guys stick around, and lump, sort of lope to 250, 260 is also not a bad situation for Sri Lanka given the run rate.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I'm just interested to see the way that Sri Lanka go about managing this game, right? Because I think if you go back and you look at that, was it 11 games unbeaten? Almost all of that was either in Sri Lanka or in Zimbabwe against teams that we should be beating, right? So I think the unknown factor, if this game's in Sri Lanka and the weather in Colombo is good enough to play the game, then I think I'm putting Sri Lanka as firm favourites. I think the playing it in Pakistan is the X factor here. That's the thing that makes me nervous.
Yeah.
Anyway, guys, I'm sorry, should we wrap it up there? We've been nattering on for a little while. If you got this far in, please do hit the subscribe button. We'll be back. I know we talked about doing a reactionary pod immediately afterwards, after the Bangladesh game. The problem was I was in Hove and there was a train strike, and there was, because of the rain delays, I just didn't know when I was going to get out. It was a disaster. But maybe if you two are up for it, we'll do some sort of reaction after the Afghan game as well, and get that up within kind of at least kind of 12 to 24 hours after the game.
Sounds like a plan, Marky.
Let's do it. You've been listening to the Mirror of the End. Thank you for listening. We'll be back very shortly. Bye.